In a quiet house on the outskirts of an American suburb, police discovered a horrific scene: the bloody bodies of an uncle and his niece. Their relationship, hidden for years, had ended in violence. Blood on the walls, evidence of a struggle, and the silence in the room were the grim conclusion of a forbidden affair. The story begins in a small town in the American Midwest, where life was measured and predictable. My uncle, a middle-aged man named Richard, lived in a two-story house he had inherited from his parents. He worked as an auto mechanic, earned a steady income, and was considered a practical and reserved person. His neighbors described him as a quiet, solitary man who spent most of his time either in his workshop or at home. His niece, Jenny, came to live with him a few years ago when she turned 19. She was studying at a local college and decided to stay temporarily with a relative to save on rent. Her relatives took this step calmly, believing their uncle would help her get on her feet. At first, their life together seemed quite natural. Jenny attended classes, Richard worked. In the evenings, they dined together, discussed everyday matters, and sometimes watched television. However, gradually, details in their relationship began to emerge that went beyond the usual family ties. Neighbors noticed that the uncle and niece were spending too much time together, traveling out of town more often than usual. No one considered this to be a big deal at the time, believing that close relatives can support each other. Inside the house, the situation was different. An emotional intimacy developed between Richard and Jenny, which over time blossomed into a romantic connection. At first, this was expressed in small gestures, excessively lingering glances, joint business trips, rare but noticeable hints. Then the relationship became more obvious. To outsiders, they remained uncle and niece, but inside the house, the situation had long since changed. For a long time, no one knew about their relationship. Jenny tried to hide it, even from her closest friends. Only once did a friend notice that she began talking less about the guys she knew and, instead, increasingly mentioned her uncle. But these suspicions were never confirmed and remained mere rumors. Jenny's parents, Richard's brother and his wife, noticed a change when their daughter began avoiding them more often and spending less time at home. They assumed she had a boyfriend, but couldn't imagine it being a close relative. Richard himself, during the rare encounters with the family, maintained a low profile and kept a low profile. Gradually, the relationship within the home became strained. Emotional dependence intensified, but so did conflicts. Richard was a jealous man and couldn't stand it when Jenny interacted with peers. Jenny, on the other hand, felt the pressure and wanted to maintain her freedom. Sometimes their arguments were heard even by the neighbors, but when inquired about, they claimed they were arguing about domestic matters. By then, Jenny had been living with her uncle for about 2 years. Her academic performance began to decline. Teachers noted that she was skipping classes more often and seemed tired. Her classmates said she seemed to have lost interest in socializing. All these changes were directly related to her situation at home. Despite the difficulties, they maintained a relationship that grew increasingly destructive with each passing month. Suspicions gradually began to emerge within the family, but no one had any direct evidence. Several times, Jenny's mother suggested that her daughter return home, but she refused, citing her studies and the convenience of living there. By this point, their relationship had already become a vicious cycle, passion and dependency intertwined with jealousy and aggression. They had no way to openly discuss what was happening with anyone else, and their secrecy only heightened the tension. To those around them, they remained uncle and niece, living an ordinary life in a suburban house. But behind closed doors, a story was unfolding that would soon lead to a tragic outcome. Over time, Richard and Jenny's relationship became increasingly strained. Their secret intimacy, long hidden from family and neighbors, became a source of constant conflict. For Jenny, it became a severe addiction. She understood that her relationship with her uncle was ruining her plans and reputation, but she could not openly break it. For Richard, his niece was the only person for whom he felt strong feelings. He increasingly sought to control her behavior. Richard was reserved, but he was overbearing in everyday life. He wanted to know where Ginny spent her time, check her phone calls, and ask questions about every classmate. Ginny tried to resist, but her status depended on housing. It was her uncle who provided her with a roof over her head. This made her vulnerable and prevented her from leaving. The arguments became frequent. Ginny insisted she wanted to live independently, rent an apartment, and focus on her studies. Richard reacted irritably, saying her life would fall apart without him. He warned that revealing their affair would have consequences. Sometimes his words sounded like outright threats. In college, a girl confided in a friend that her uncle was becoming increasingly clingy. She mentioned his jealousy, but kept the details to herself. Her parents noticed changes in their daughter's behavior. She became withdrawn and rarely came home. She answered questions evasively, claiming she was busy with her studies. Neighbors heard arguments in the house several times. Shouting, slamming doors, and harsh voices indicated conflict. Ginny was once seen crying outside, but she soon returned to the house. No one intervened, dismissing it as a family disagreement. Richard's jealousy grew. He would visit the college to check on his niece's social life. He demanded that she spend more time at home and reacted harshly to any plan she made. Her conversations about the future became a particularly sensitive topic. Ginny mentioned wanting to move to another city, but Richard insisted he wouldn't allow it. Those around her recalled that the girl once confessed, "If I leave, he'll do something terrible." She didn't elaborate, and her words remained unanswered. By this point, their relationship had ceased to be a secret intimacy and had become a struggle for control. Ginny felt trapped, while Richard saw her attempts at independence as a threat to his power. Their conflicts grew increasingly dangerous, and tensions reached a level where any argument could turn tragic. That morning began, as usual. Neighbors saw Ginny leave her house, heading to college. She walked quickly, as if in a hurry, and barely said hello. She carried a folder with notes. Shortly afterward, Richard went to the workshop, but, according to colleagues, he didn't stay there long before returning home. It was Thursday, a typical workday. Nothing foreshadowed the tragedy. That afternoon, Ginny returned from college earlier than usual. According to one version, her classes were canceled. Neighbors heard her enter the house and close the door. A few minutes later, the first loud voices were heard. According to eyewitnesses, Richard and Ginny were arguing. The topic of conversation was unclear, but the tone indicated a serious conflict. The investigation later established that the argument began over Ginny's plans to move out. She insisted she wanted to share a place with a friend, but Richard categorically objected. He accused her of betrayal and said he wouldn't let anyone ruin their relationship. The conversation quickly devolved into shouting matches. Ginny declared she would leave no matter what. These words became a turning point. According to the case file, Richard grabbed a kitchen knife. A struggle ensued in the house. Forensic investigators found traces of blood and an overturned chair on the kitchen floor. Ginny tried to break free and run to the door, but was stopped. Neighbors later reported hearing a woman scream, followed by sudden silence. The girl's body was found in the living room. Her arms had deep cuts, typical signs of self-defense. The fatal wound was to the chest. There was a lot of blood in the room, and signs of a struggle extended from the kitchen to the sofa. The investigation had difficulty reconstructing what happened next. Wounds were also found on Richard's body, but their nature indicated self-harm. After killing his niece, he stabbed himself several times. The fatal blow was to the neck. His body was found nearby, on the floor near the girl. The atmosphere in the house confirmed that the tragedy had unfolded rapidly. A half-finished mug of coffee remained on the table, with Ginny's notebook open nearby. Her phone lay on the floor, its screen shattered. Blood stains remained on the walls and furniture. Everything indicated that the conflict had erupted suddenly and ended within minutes. Neighbors alerted the police to the screaming and sudden cessation of noise. When officers arrived, the door was unlocked. Upon entering, they discovered the bodies. One officer later wrote in a report, "The scene was chaotic and shocking. Both were lying on the floor with obvious signs of violence all around." The situation left no doubt of a tragic outcome. Forensic experts meticulously recorded every detail. Photographs were taken, blood samples were collected, and the knife was placed in evidence. An examination revealed that this was the weapon used to inflict all the injuries. No evidence of tampering was found. The autopsy confirmed the sequence of events. Jenny died first from a penetrating chest wound. She had at least 5 cuts on her arms, indicating an attempt to defend herself. Richard had 3 wounds, one of which was fatal. The examiners concluded that the injuries were self-inflicted after the attack on Jenny. The first press reports soon began appearing. Citing police reports, journalists wrote of a shocking family drama. The revelation of the victims' relationship caused a particular stir. Local residents, upon learning the details, were stunned. To them, Richard was a quiet neighbor, and Jenny an ordinary student. No one could have imagined such a devastating story unfolding behind closed doors. That day marked the end of a relationship that had been hidden for years. A secret affair, jealousy, addiction, and fear merged in one brief but furious episode of violence. By evening, the house was cordoned off with police tape, and the town was buzzing with the tragedy that left no chance for either participant. After the bodies were discovered, the investigation began immediately. In the first hours, several teams worked at the scene: patrol officers, forensic experts, and medical examiners. The house was sealed off, and the surrounding area was cordoned off. It was important for the police to record everything that could be of significance: the location of the bodies, furniture, bloodstains, and fingerprints. The reports noted that evidence of a struggle began in the kitchen and extended into the living room. Blood on the floor formed chaotic stains, indicating the victims had moved abruptly. A chair was overturned, with a broken mug lying nearby. Bloody handprints were found on the kitchen wall, indicating an attempt at resistance. All these details supported the initial theory of a conflict that escalated into violence. The key item was a kitchen hacksaw stained with blood. Forensic experts identified fingerprints belonging to Richard on the handle. This immediately narrowed the field of possibilities. No other suspects were considered at that time. All indications were that he had killed his niece and then committed suicide. However, the investigation didn't stop at the obvious. Officers began interviewing neighbors and acquaintances of the family. Evidence confirmed that tensions had long existed in the house. Several neighbors reported hearing arguments on numerous occasions. One neighbor reported, "Lately, there's been screaming almost every week. But we thought it was just domestic issues." Particular attention was paid to Jenny's parents. During questioning, her mother revealed that her daughter had become withdrawn and rarely shared details about her life. Her father confirmed that he suspected something was wrong, but had no proof. When investigators informed them that the affair with her uncle had indeed occurred, the family was shocked. The forensic examination results were a crucial step. The autopsy confirmed the nature of the wounds. Jenny had one fatal wound and several defensive wounds. This indicated she had tried to defend herself to the last. Richard, on the other hand, had 3 stab wounds, only one of which was fatal. The experts concluded that the nature of his injuries was consistent with self-harm. The investigation also included a review of personal correspondence. Messages with a friend were found on Jenny's phone, in which the woman wrote about wanting to move out of her uncle's house. One of the messages read, "He won't let me go. I'm scared." This evidence confirmed the motive: the woman's desire to free herself from his control and the man's refusal to accept her decision. The collected materials formed the basis of an official report. It detailed that the murder stemmed from a family conflict, specifically a secret affair and an attempt to break it off. The police concluded that Richard had attacked Jenny in a fit of rage and committed suicide after her death. Despite the obvious, the case raised many questions. The prosecutor's office conducted an investigation to rule out the possibility of third-party involvement. Additional tests were ordered: DNA testing of the murder weapon and blood tests for alcohol and drugs. The results showed that Richard was sober at the time of the tragedy, ruling out the possibility of intoxication. The investigation lasted several weeks. During this time, the media actively covered the story, publishing biographical details of the participants. Newspapers wrote about a forbidden romance that ended in bloodshed. Television reports showed the house with yellow police tape and neighbors being questioned. For the police, the case wasn't a mystery in the traditional sense. The facts were obvious, the evidence straightforward. However, in the public's perception, the tragedy took on a different dimension. People wondered how such a connection could have been hidden for so long and why no one close to her had intervened sooner. Official documents classified the case as a murder followed by suicide. The case was handed over to the prosecutor's office for final closure. But the story left a deep mark on the city community. Discussions continued, and each new fact published in the press only heightened interest. By the end of the investigation, the house where the murder occurred stood empty. Relatives were hesitant to return, and neighbors tried to avoid it. For everyone involved, the events were over, but the consequences for the surrounding community were only just beginning to manifest. A formal trial in the case did not take place. The prime suspect, Richard, died at the scene. Nevertheless, the prosecutor's office and the district court were obliged to conduct a hearing to legally conclude the case and officially confirm the circumstances. This included reviewing investigative materials, expert reports, and questioning witnesses. The hearings reviewed medical reports, crime scene examination reports, and forensic reports. All the evidence pointed to one thing. Richard, in a fit of jealousy, killed his niece and then took his own life. Alternative theories, attack by a third party or robbery, were ruled out. Despite the absence of a defendant, public attention to the case was intense. Local media published articles with sensational headlines, emphasizing that the outward calm concealed a forbidden affair that led to tragedy. Newspapers wrote about the psychological pressure Richard exerted on his niece, her fear, and her attempts to leave. For Jenny's family, the trial was a test. Her parents attended the hearings where the expert examination results were officially read. For them, this confirmed what they had suspected but had been reluctant to believe. Her father spoke of feeling guilty for not recognizing the scale of the problem in time. Her mother noted that her daughter tried to hide the truth, fearing condemnation and scandal. Public reaction was divided. Some expressed condolences to the family and condemned Richard's actions, considering them cruel and obsessive. Others debated the morality of the relationship, pointing out that such a relationship carried the risk of a tragic outcome from the start. Discussions on social media continued for weeks, with people debating whether the incident could have been prevented. Officially, the case was closed several months later. The final report stated, Jenny's death was the result of her uncle's deliberate actions. Richard's death has been ruled a suicide following a murder. After the trial concluded, media attention gradually faded, but the story remained a topic of discussion in the city for a long time. The house where the tragedy occurred remained empty, and neighbors avoided mentioning it. For many, the case served as a reminder that hidden conflicts within families can lead to the most dire consequences. The story of a secret affair between an uncle and niece ended in tragedy, murder, and a subsequent suicide. The investigation and official conclusion brought closure, but for the family and society, a shocking scar remains, a reminder of the destructive power of hidden connections.